In this video, I'm gonna show you why it's so important that you develop project management skills. After all, we are all project managers, including you. I'm Rogério Manso, and I'm gonna help you start project now. When it comes to transform ideas into reality, what's the word that comes in your mind? In my mind, the word that comes is project. And the project is the way that you can use to transform your ideas into reality. But do we know what the definition of a project is? So let me tell you what is a project. A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, a service, or a result. This is the definition from the PMI, the Project Management Institute. It's a large organization that involves all project managers around the world. And in this definition, it's very important that you pay attention in three words. The first word is the project is temporary. It's not something that takes forever in terms of the duration. So it have a start and an end date. The second point is the word endeavor. Endeavor means that you need resources to work in your project to deliver your product or your service. You need to organize these resources in order that they can, at the end of this temporary period, deliver what you need, what you want in your project. And the third word is unique. A project always will deliver something unique, a product, a service, or a result. Let me give you some examples of projects. When we talk about products could be anything that it's something that you can see or you can measure or you can touch. For example, constructing a building or a facility, acquiring a new modified data system, developing a new payroll system in your company, or designing a new car. These are big examples of big projects. You can also have a personal project like writing a book or running a movie or developing a new software to marketing. So all these examples, and there are many others that you can use to create a product. But also, when we talk about the project, you can have services as a deliverable. For example, you can have a personal project to renovate your kitchen or your house, or you can organize a birthday party for your family or your parents or someone in your family. This is interesting. I have an example. When my dad made 80 years old, we did a trip in a cruise, and all the family was together. So we need to organize this trip, this travel, in order that everyone will be able to be there and to enjoy this moment. So you can also, another example is to provide a help desk support for a limited time. Providing help desk support, just this, is not exactly project. This is a process that have a start date but don't have an end date. But when you define that these services have a limited time duration, then you can consider that this service is a project. Another example, develop a community newsletter. So to develop a newsletter, it's a project. But to run the newsletter and distribute the newsletter, this is not a project. Organizing a family vacation, for example, as I said, I did this with my family sometimes, or implementing a new business process. A new business process could be a project. Once this process is started, then your project finished, and then you can start running a new system, a new process. You can also have what we call results. Results is something that will bring some quality or some result in your life or in your company or in your community. For example, you can have a project to augmenting the level of project management knowledge in your company. It's a very good and interesting project. Of course, when you define some results, you need to have some indicators, some key indicators that you're gonna achieve this project, this result. For example, if you want to augment the level of project management knowledge, you need to define how much, what's the level of increase that you need in your project. It's 10%, 20%, 30%. So it's easy to measure the result, your deliverable, and to make sure that you achieved your result. Another example, reducing the level of analphabetization or increasing the percentage of occupancy in hotels or the percentage of vaccinated people. So all these results are example of projects, but they need to have some key indicators, some information about how did you achieve these results. So all these examples, the product, service, results, are good examples of projects. Of course, you should have many other examples, either in your personal or in your professional life. And you can use these examples to refer my next information. That's how you're going to transform these ideas into reality. As a project manager, you need to understand some very important points. First, in your project, you need to have set a clear start and end date. Why is this important? Because, as I said, a project is a temporary endeavor. So you need to have a start date and you need to have an end date when your project will be delivered to your customer, to your users. Second point is a project needs to create something new. When you define a project, it's because this product, service, or result have never been done before. That's why you need to transform this idea, this new need, requirement into reality. And then you're going to create something new in your organization or in your life or in your community. Third point is a project has boundaries. This is the bad news for you. You will never have all the best conditions, the good conditions, the enough conditions to run your project. A project has always boundaries, which means that you're going to have limitations in your resources. You're going to have limitations in your time. You're going to have limitations in your quality. You're going to have limitations in your costs. So there's a lot of points that you need to manage, that you need to think about when you run a project. What are your boundaries? What are your limitations, your restrictions that will create some risks, you create some challenge to run your project? Another point is a project is not a process. As I said, a project should not be confused with process. For example, when you're going to develop a new payroll process, this payroll process is a project since you are working to define this process. When you're going to start running this process, the payroll process, this stops to be a project and could be an ongoing process. So it's very important that you understand the difference between process and project. Also, when you're running a project, you can have different scenarios to manage or to develop a strategy to run your project. Today, there's many strategies, different based on the scenarios you're going to have in your project. One of the most common is the traditional mode. Traditional project management means that you're gonna work in your project as we did in the since the beginning. So you need to define what you're gonna do, define your scope, define your product, service, or result, and you're gonna develop an upfront plan to run this project. This upfront plan is something that will have all activities, all resources identification, and also the duration of your project. Of course, for many situations, different for many scenarios, this is not possible. Sometimes you have some situations that you cannot wait to have all this information ready to start your project. For example, if you are working in a project to develop a new software. A software is something that you can develop in parts by models, and that's why it comes to a new approach that is called Agile. Agile was created some times ago, that was addressed specifically to software development, IT industry. So Agile is another approach, is not another method, or I don't know. I don't like to call method, but it's an approach, a strategy to deliver your project faster, okay, and bring values faster to our customer. There's a third strategy that comes more recently, that it's hybrid, which mix some characteristics for traditional and from Agile. So we have projects that have some parts or some moments in the timeline that they work in a traditional way, and some moments they work in an Agile way, and they need to work to integrate these two processes in the management, and we call this hybrid. Also, you can have projects that work with remote teams, especially these days. We have a lot of projects, teams working remotely, and this is a different way to manage a project, because you need to think in a way to communicate, how to change documents, to deliver products based that since you have remote resources in your team. Also, you can have a project where the activities are outsourced. Imagine that you have a project where you're gonna hire a company to develop your product. You need to manage your project. You need to manage some part of your project internally, but most of the other activities will be executed in another environment, in another company. You need to manage these activities. In this case, you have even two project management. You have your management in your project internally, and also you have this part of your project that is outsourced in another company. So to define the best strategy, it's very important based on the characteristics and the requirements that you have and the boundaries that you have in your project. For example, if you don't have your resources locally placed, then you cannot, maybe you're gonna choose to work in a remote strategy. If you know, for example, the full scope, the full information, the full requirements of your project, you know all resources that you need, maybe you can work in a traditional way. If you have a project that could have many chains during the execution, maybe you're gonna use an Agile. Let me illustrate this for you. If you're gonna build a house is something that you need to work in a traditional way. You cannot work in a remote, because your team should be in place. You can outsource your project to a company to build your house. It's possible. agile is not the best strategy to build a house, because you will not change frequently the requirements of your project. So if you want to build a house, maybe you're going to choose between a traditional way or an outsourced way. If you're going to develop a new tool, a new software, you can use agile, you can use remote, and you can use outsourced, depending on how you're going to manage it, how you're going to control your project, where are your resources, where are the culture, the knowledge to run your project. So to develop a software, you can use agile, remote, or outsourced. So depending on your project, depending on the product you're going to deliver, you can find a different approach or different strategies to deliver your project. But why having project management skills are so important to you? And now I will gonna talk to especially to you that are asking, why do I need to learn project management? This is something that should not be a question for you, since you have projects in your professional life, in your personal life to run. So if you run a project, you need to know how to manage this project. And the most important reason that you need to know about why you need project management skills is because you need to add value to your projects. You need to confirm, to ensure that your projects are really delivering the value that you need, that your customer need, that your sponsor need, that your users need in your projects. This is the most important reason why you need to develop project management skills, to make sure that the value that you are delivering in your project are really the expected value from the customers. The second point is to help your company, your business, to align the strategy, the business strategies. When a company, when your industry developing a business strategy, this business strategy is based on some projects, because to achieve this strategy, to achieve the results of this strategy, you need to run some projects, and you need to make sure that the projects that you are running, that you are working on, are really aligned with the business strategy. Let's say, for example, that your company wants to, I don't know, increase the number of customers, the number of clients in 10%. So you need to see if the project that you have in your portfolio are working in this direction to increase the number of customers in 10%. So if you're working in a project that does not affect, does not impact the number of customers, maybe your project is not a priority in your company in terms of the business strategy. Another point is to bring leadership and direction to your project. For me, this is another very important point when we talk about project management skills. I see a lot of companies using people to manage projects that they don't have enough knowledge, they don't have enough skills to manage projects. What's the result? Projects in this case have a high probability to fail. Not only to fail, but also to not add enough value to your company. Usually in this case, the project goes to be over budget, or does not finish on time, or does not brings enough quality to the product. So brings leadership and direction to your project. It's one of the main reasons why you need to develop some project management skills. When I said that you need some skills to bring directions to your projects, it's because you need to ensure realistic planning and control in your projects. Once you know that how to plan a project, how to monitor activities, how to develop a best strategy to run your project, for sure you're going to have the tools, the conditions to develop a good plan, to define the good resources, and to monitor and control these activities to make sure that at the end you're going to deliver what you are you looking for in your project. If you work to have your project running in a good direction and you have a realistic planning and control, you're going to ensure the quality of your project. You're going to ensure the quality of your deliverable, of your service that your customer, your user, or your sponsor are waiting for. So ensuring the quality is one of the result of project management, a good project management have in the project. And for you will get recognized in your work as a leader, as a good manager, a good project, and someone that really add value to the company. So for you, these results in have better payments, have better conditions of work, have better resources, and also get always in the high impression from your management. When we talk, remember we talk about boundaries in project. The main source of fails in project are that you do not identify correctly the resources in your project. When you talk about resources, we talk about the three kinds of resources. The first is the human resources. Human resources, it's important because you need to define not only who will work in a specific activity in your project, but also if these resources have enough knowledge, enough experience, and the conditions to execute these activities. Human resources, it's a key problem in project management because we know that most of the time we don't have enough resources, human resources available in our project. Sometimes we have resources, but they don't have time. They are working in many projects at the same time. Sometimes we don't have these resources and they need to look for resources externally to the company. So defining the human resources that you need in your project, it's very important that you do carefully to make sure that you have the good resources and these resources are really available. The second point is the financial resources. We're talking about the cost, the money that you need to run your project. And you need money for many things. You need to pay your resources, you need to buy stuff, to buy materials, and also you need financial resources to your contingency. You need to manage the risks of your project, and you need to have some buffer, some contingency in terms of financial resources to use in case these risks comes to a problem. So identifying financial resources is not only to use in your project, but also to define the contingents and the money, the buffer that you need to run your project. And finally, you need material resources. Material resources here, we are talking about not only stuffs in general, but we are talking about IT, computers, internet, network, printers, tables, desk, rooms. We need to maybe travel, we need to vehicles, we need, I don't know. You can have a list of material that you need to run your project. And this material of course, will have a cost for your project, and you need to identify the cost of this material to have the final budget. So your budget will include the material, the financial, and the human resources that you're gonna use in your project. Also, these materials, as the human resources have, you need to identify when you need this material, when you need this material be available in your project. So defining these resources in the timeline is very important. When you need, what you need, and for how long you need these resources. This will help you to have a good plan and be able to monitor and control your project. But at the end, what really you need to, how to help you managing your project? I would like to start with the most simple way. As you can see in this picture, start with a post-it. Start with a small piece of paper to define the requirements, to define the needs, the business, what they need from your project. What are the main deliverables? What are the deliverables? What are the resources? What are the constraints? What are the risks? Put everything in a small piece of papers, and then you're going to start organizing these post-its in your project. The first thing is define what is in your scope, what you're going to deliver, what will be the main deliverables in your project. So important as defining what is in your scope, it's what is not in your scope. When you define what you're going to deliver, it's important that you delimitate what is out of scope, because otherwise you're going to always change your scope and adding more functionalities, and this will change your plan. To help you to define your scope, the idea is to break down your project in small parts. So try to think your project as a whole, but when you're going to start planning, break down this whole picture in small parts, in small pieces. So if you want to, for example, start on vacation, so to start on vacation, you need to think about the hotel, about the travel tickets, about the food, about the transportation, about the places to go. So these parts, when you put together, these will define your scope, but you can manage each one of these parts independently so you can deliver it easily to your customer. But when you define these small parts, it's important that you define the main deliverables, the key deliverables in your project, to define the critical path, what will be the path in your project when you're going to have all these deliverables. Since you have the deliverables, you're going to assign resources, you're going to define the resources, human resources, material resources, and financial resources, to work in the activities to create these deliverables. And at the end, you're going to develop a project plan. The project plan will include all deliverables. Inside these deliverables, the activities that you need to execute, to run, to create this deliverable. From these activities, you're going to have the resources that you need to use to work on these tasks, and for each task, you're going to have a duration, a timeline for your project. And this is your project plan. So I hope you understood really how important it is to develop project management skills. And you're going to start working in your project management skills to become a project management professional. See you.